Welcome to the latest episode of The Performance Gap. I'm your host, Sami Hussein, and today we're going to be sitting down with Sam Portland, S&C coach, speed expert, and also with over 15 years working with athletes from the Premiership Rugby all the way to the NFL. Today, we're going to be discussing all things speed development, why typically most are starting their training in the wrong areas, and actually what needs to come first when we really want to improve our speed. Let's jump in. Sam, what's the performance gap in speed training?
Yeah. So when it particularly pertains to team sports and field sports, the performance gap in speed training is simply a lack of specificity. Then that specificity is derived not from a general preparation continuum that you would have strength, power, speed, like you would see in the Tudor Bumpers work and stuff like that. So the conversion of force qualities, it's actually more the transfer of training to sport. So we have a plethora of hamstring injuries in field sports. ACLs are bigger than ever, groins, so much time lost, and we have some of the most physically prepared athletes that there ever have been. And so when we're training to change numbers rather than training to enhance adaptation, that's the huge gap. And if we contextualize speed as speed of movement, that's what speed in sport, yes, there's the running variations, but it's the formation of high quality sport action and sporting movement, then it all has to be fed towards the sport. Right. And I think that's the big gap.
Awesome. And I guess if we start, you mentioned a few things there. If we take it back to very prepared athletes, we're in an industry and time where we've probably got the best tech for physical development. Starting back down at general preparation. And so obviously for the layman, this is just general physical development starting in the gym. Where do you feel we go wrong from the start? Is there a starting point where we go wrong, or are we off to a good start?
Yeah, I think the intention when we set out to write a training program is biased towards confirmation of our job. And that's why, I'm 38. So I've been coaching for a good 20 years. I've been training for 25 years, and I didn't have any tech to start with. And as you evolve, like when I first started at Wasps, it was the big GPS boom, and you had contact mats and force plates, but they weren't really that accessible. So tech wasn't even in the equation. It was iometer, tape measures. If you were lucky, you had a set of lasers. Like Browers were like $1,500, £2,000 then. So it was really rare. But even at Wasps, when we first started, the speed gates sat in the office and weren't used. And so now you've got fucking Nord boards, you've got groin squeeze device, you've got tech for everything to generate a number. And that personally for me comes from, yes, that we need data-informed practice, but we don't need data to crowd practice and cloud practice, because it's how do I keep my job? Show that number went from here to here. And I always say, all the coaches I work with, the only number you need to fucking care about is a scoreboard, because that's the one that'll keep you in the job, not anything else, Right. So, because the condition knows the first person that gets fired. When the team lose and you have a bad season, conditioner goes, because the easiest thing to blame is the fitness is not, they weren't fit enough. And so that is the first place to start, is actually understanding that you don't need tech to create a program that works. What you need is to be asking the right questions. So and a lot of the stuff I'm talking about is 50, 60 years old. Okay. We're 2026. And if someone picked up a book, I've got Secret of Soviet Sport up there. I've got Special Strength Manual.
Yeah.
Yeah. We've got Verkhoshansky's work, got Bondarchuk's, got everything. They didn't have that tech. They were trying to build the tech to use it in the right way back then. But what we're asking for is what, and when we look at something known as transfer logic. So transfer logic is basically, do the dominoes, when you push one domino down, does it knock the next domino over? And if it doesn't knock the next domino over, then you've got a problem, because you're actually causing the rate limiter, you're causing the problem. And what you actually get is a detraining effect. So when we start in the gym, for example, it's like, right, we're full of piss and vinegar. Let's lift the heaviest weights that we can lift. Let's just get as fucking strong as humanly possible. And within 6 months, you're already hitting a space of diminishing returns, because you'll know how easy is it to get someone to a 5 RM of 1.5 times body weight on a back squat, or 1.8 on a trap bar. Like, it's
as long as they're fairly mature,
yeah. And even like using with youth athletes, like using a 1x20 program. Shit, in our academy, we had a 12-year-old do 22 goblet squats with a 42 kilo dumbbell.
It's a lot of work capacity.
Yeah, he was 12. Does he need to be any stronger than that? No. And that was just 1x20. And that's why, yes, is the 1x20 method unbelievable, because it matures with the athlete. So when we start in the gym, we need to be asking the question, how quick can I get out of it? If my goal, if I've got a football player, I've got a rugby player, I've got an ice hockey player, whatever, if I don't answer that question, then I'm always going to be stuck in there. One of the coaches that I've worked with is a good example of this. He, back in COVID, a guy called Rob Morledge, just won 3 titles in the Thai Premier League and Asian Championships. He started out in Cambodia, was at West Brom, did a load of gear. Great guy. He didn't have a gym. He was working in the top level in Cambodia, and like, you're close to Southeast Asia. Southeast Asian football is big. It's not, they don't, it's not the EPL, but they take it very seriously. But he was in Cambodia, and they didn't have a gym. So they did specific strength work, special strength work on the pitch after training, 0 soft tissue injuries, lifetime speed PBs everywhere on the GPS. What does that tell you? With senior athletes, and some of these were 19 as well, so they're still babies, really, that the rate of transfer that we see from a general strength environment ceases quite early. And the challenge and the problem that many coaches face is twofold. I don't think it's the bias is fostered into the coach at an early age because of two things. One, it's so good to see the weights go up on the bar. I remember when I squatted 5 wheels aside, box squat, 5 wheels aside, wide, tore my hip labrum, right? And it was like, following the West Side, and I was like 100 kilos, 5 RM, 2 times body weight. Like, I should have stopped doing that a long time ago. But like, because you get the feedback loop, psychological feedback loop is more is better. And that's what we're hardwired to, more is better. But then it's also fostered in the education system. Because in education, you have to hit KPIs of curriculum. And whether we like it or not, every academic institution, every student is a customer.
Yeah.
Okay. My mum worked in education, still works as deputy director of education. They have to go and recruit in colleges because now they're seeing less people want to go to university, and more people want to stay in college to do their higher education because it's cheaper. You get the same degree, and it's cheaper. But you have to go and recruit. So every student is worth $9,500 a year. And so how do we get these kids through? Because it's all about pass rates. And can we get 3 years, the business stuff? That's my lifetime value of my customer is $27,000 a pop. And if we're lucky, they stay. So then, exactly. So then what they don't teach is they teach them the things to pass the curriculum that's pre-laid out, as opposed to exploratory. my biggest gripe with the university, when I was at Brunel doing my undergrad, I set up the rugby strength and conditioning program there. The players were paying me, and I did 2 sessions a week with them in the morning. They'd pay me. We had like 100 kids, 100 players. They all paid me 20 quid a term. Fucking, that's all right. That'll do. And we ran
Especially
it.
at
That's now
university, yeah.
well, yeah. And I was PTing alongside, because I was a fresher at 21 after breaking my leg. And that's now the Ealing Academy, the formation of that program. But I was coaching athletes while studying human performance.
Right.
Going through, when I did my masters, I was at which I wouldn't advise anyone to do. I was an intern and started my career at Wasps, and I was doing my masters. And what you have is so many kids at university that don't do any S&C. And there is enough money in a pot somewhere that every head of strength and conditioning, the educational department, should be responsible for overseeing the S&C of the sports teams of the university. They employ 6 or 7 coaches that manage those teams like a collegiate system. And guess who fucking works for those people? The students. And they practice their craft and they coach. I'd been personal training
the internship problem as well. Yeah,
exactly. I'd been coaching. I was personal training. I started coaching rugby when I was about 13 years old, and then I was personal training from 17, 18, and so I'd already got my chops from a coaching perspective. It was just switching and maturing because I wasn't very good, I'd say. But that's where, gone off on a bit of a tangent, but that's where the problem starts. And I always ask, why does that? No point pointing the finger if you can't justify the why. So when coaches get into the gym, they go, right, I did a fucking project on strength. Oh, what did you do dissertation on? Creatine, post-activation potentiation, or
I actually remember being in a study for someone.
Or like chugging bicarbonate of soda at 7 o'clock in the morning before you do a watt bike or something, So, so like the taught bias is fosters in, and then our visual bias and our hardwired bias is like, if I get those up, then more is more. But that's why I published my book. I like to think when I put my book together, I was able to bring to a new audience everything that's in all the other books that I've found useful over the last 15, 20 years and put it and geared it towards transfer of training for speed in field sports. Because one of the most important things happen that we miss. We spend too much time under the bar. We create diminishing returns. And it's not that your investment isn't worth the time. It's not that it isn't, it's not going anywhere. You're compounding on your strength. That's absolutely fine. But what that's actually doing is detraining your higher motor potential. So the stronger you get, the more you dissipate eccentric rate of force development. The more you dissipate elasticity, the more you detrain the thing you're trying to train. And that's why that simple domino analogy is if I've got 3 dominoes in the row, and this is transfer linking and transfer logic. I even built a tool called the transfer index that does this for people. Right? So if you put your 5RM squat, and then you put your broad jump in, and then you put your 10 meter acceleration, you will know where the rate limiter is. That's what coaches need to understand straight away. And if the dominoes are balanced well, your strength domino is going to be really big, and it will be able to knock the power one over, and it will knock the speed over. If you're too strong, that first domino is going to be really small, and it will fall, and it won't even come close to touching power. It won't even come close because it's too strong. It's too biased. You're going to get that early transfer, and you're going to get that easy transfer that many people, it's like, I did it then, so the evidence has shown me that I can do it now. I've actually got a client that I'm working with. I'll tell you the story. I've got his numbers on the board here. 1.85 times 5RM back squat. He's an ice hockey player in Michigan going for the Ottawa Hockey League. It's the biggest ice hockey league competition in the world. And if he gets there, he'll go to the NHL. Pretty much, that's the goal. He's 18 years old. I was like, send me your numbers. His dad found me on LinkedIn, and so we ran our basic assessment, which covers over what we were talking about there. He's got a 1.85 times body weight back squat for a 5RM. Of course, he's squatting in high school since he was fucking 12.
Yeah.
Broad jump, only 2.7. Triple broad jump, only 716. Okay, so that tells you everything you need to know. That broad, if you've got a 1.85 times body weight, you should be broad jumping close to 3 meters. You should be up in the 290s. Like, come on, at 6 foot. And then it shows, because you've got the singular power, you've got the repeat power, like the repeated force expression, 7.16. Mate, I could broad jump, triple broad jump 10 meters in my mid-20s before I started getting all these big injuries. Like 10 meters for a triple broad jump. And this kid can only do 716. I'm 6'4". 14-day change. We ran what I talked about, and I'll just tell you, in a 14-day change, we took his broad jump up to 285 and his triple broad jump up to 790. Didn't touch a weight in 14 days.
I think it's really interesting because, and I see a lot of it online, especially you mentioned a couple of things, and there's a lot to cover, so we'll go.
Yeah, sorry, mate.
No, I love it. It's exactly what this podcast's for. Obviously, relating it back to the transfer, the one thing that, and from the coach perspective, and this is something that's and there's going to be some graduates listening to this, and they know exactly what I'm on about. You don't have this understanding of the transfer of physical development, because we always get taught, and if you look at the UKSCA's definition of a strength and conditioning coach, it's the physical preparation to mitigate injury and develop sports performance. And what does that look like? All right, they need to be strong and robust, resilient and robust. Yeah. And then that's that's pillar number one. And it's like, oh, well, if force times, F equals MA, force times massive acceleration. So if they get stronger, they're naturally going to get more powerful, which we both know there is a diminishing returns as we come to that. And I think that's where it goes so wrong. Because even when I was in my first internship, it was like, we're going to do a single hop and stick, triple hop and stick, single leg.
Yeah.
And that in itself gives you so much. And you're like, oh, yeah, but like, you're not going to be bouncing off one leg. But then you start looking at it and you build this coach. Now I've actually seen someone re-accelerate on a single leg. They're looking at their eccentric leg force, especially with youth athletes, when they got to decelerate 5 times their body weight on one leg. Then you start getting this picture and understanding, actually, hang on a minute. As you said, when you take the individual away from the training, and don't get me wrong, strength training is, we do need elements of strength training, but we need to be strong more so. Which I guess we can definitely discuss about that in particular. But I want to take it back to that transfer of training. So there's going to be some individuals that are listening to this who don't have a science background. So if we were to simplify this in a layman's terms, how would you describe and break down the transfer to speed development from a general prep point of view?
Yeah. So we're basically looking that a change in an untrained. The change in a trained exercise, okay, and how that affects an untrained exercise. So that's where we're looking at talking about there is, has my deadlift cycle improved my broad jump? That's what we're looking for. And if my broad jump improves, has my 5 meter and 10 meter acceleration improved? Or has my broad jump improved, then has my hop improved?
Yeah.
So that's where we're asking the question. We're looking at dependent versus independent variables. And when you break it down like that, like logic, that's why we call it transfer logic, you can see that there is not a barbell on a rugby pitch. So, they don't walk out chalking up their hands ready to get in the rack, right? They walk out to play the game. So, and this is, that's where the principle of specificity is found. It's like, if you just can, and this is where intellectual masturbation completely crowds the profession, because there's a really good quote, is that the thing is something like, the thing that drives academics so crazy is because the stakes are so low.
Right.
So academics will argue with academics over academia, whilst the people outside go, look at those fucks arguing.
Yeah, they're doing the real work.
Should we just play the game?
Yeah.
And so where our profession sits so small, that's where the significance is found. It's peer approval.
I think you've nailed that sport on the head. Yeah, I think it's interesting because, and we may even touch on this, because I'd be keen to hear your understanding based upon obviously your premise of taking the individual, the athlete, out of the weight room, because we get it. We always understand that, especially on sports, you look at the functional patterns, that side of bravado of kind of this new way of moving, and it's like this is kind of like the silver bullet, when we obviously know there is a cult element to it. However, I do believe there is a nuanced approach to physical training now, especially when we remove that clinical or traditional strength training. And I guess for you, in terms of what we've been discussing about kind of moving out of the gym, where do you sit on that? Obviously there's going to be some element of strength development, but does it depend on age? Does it depend on maturation?
Yeah, like, I think it's incredibly, there's some really good points that you've acknowledged there, right? I had a mentor, and he said to me, and this was outside of strength and conditioning, I think you can learn more about your own profession in outside fields than actually inside it. And but that shouldn't stop you buying my book, by the way. But the zig when everyone zags. And it's some marketing, right? Zig when everyone zags. Because what people tend to do is find the compensatory mechanism to the thing that's been causing them the problem. So, case in point, why you see like the rise of like functional movement, like Ido Portal gets a low, like animal movements, and you know, you're getting a lot more fluidity, like David Weck with his stuff. I think he's
naughty as well.
Yeah, he's David Weck is so smart, but the character of David Weck's wild. But the like his vest and the wearable weights, like Lila Exogen, like this stuff is where it needs to come, because what people are doing, you see it from the top down, like Christian McCaffrey go to Ido Portal, right? The San Francisco running back. And do you know why? Because it just feels good. My fiance, professional dancer, performer, 20-year career there, and you know, top shows and stuff. And she could split leap 4.5 foot in the air, never touched a weight in her life. And so, well, what is that? Those are the questions that we need to be asking. And so everything is a product of rotation. Everything is a product of rotation. Ball and socket joint. The gravitational spin of the earth is a rotation. You wouldn't be able to move if we didn't rotate. So rotation unlocks so much. And when you're actually putting one foot in front of the other running, your thoracic spine is rotating to compensate. So your arm comes up, you rotate this way. Your spine will rotate with it. It will rotate underneath. There's rotation everywhere. So when like you've probably done it when you've come off of a break and then you go into a squat cycle, your first squat session back, you feel disabled for about 3 days because the restrictions, the mechanical restrictions, because of the torques on the joints, shut the body down. You go, what the fuck is that? And you're like a dribbling mess because you're just shot to pieces. And so when we're thinking about how do we use, my grandfather was a master carpenter, and I used to tinker with him in the shed when I was a little boy, and he'd just be telling me what all these tools are used for. 10 different chisels. It's all one chisel. They all have the same job, but they all have very different jobs. The overall job is to manipulate wood, but to the degree of which they do is very different. And so if anyone wants to watch like anything nuanced, you could go and watch like YouTube, like Japanese carpentry. Like it's unbelievable, like tenants and mortar joints. So, like the old school barns and when they put the pins in, like that is a really good metaphor for what do you need to do to create elegance, which is high sporting movement, which is elegant. When you look at it, you see someone like, do you remember that video of Ronaldo jumping up and heading that ball? And he's like Jordan in the air. And it's like, that's just poetry. General strength doesn't do that, So again, it's looking at, we look at like Western medicine, symptomology, which we're chasing symptomology rather than the holistic root cause. Like, how do we balance things? Yeah. So a young athlete needs to develop their strength. They need to, like Milo of Crichton. When he was born, his dad bought him a calf, and he carried the calf up the hill every day until he was a grown man. He could carry a bull. Right? There is a reason why that story exists. Okay,
every uni student was indoctrinated with it within first year.
Yeah, so it's a very simple thing to understand progressive overload, but what happens? The nuance towards that story is actually how the calf changes into the bull, not how the man changes for the calf, because specificity compounds, because he wouldn't be able to do it otherwise. So when we're looking at what are we creating our exit criteria, it's a simple pie chart. Are we spending, the performance investment? Is the investment into the gym actually creating a good return? Can the four walls inside the gym be used for different things? Like if you speak to a gymnast about a gym, it will look very different to a rugby player.
I think it's obviously culture comes into that as well, in particular, depending on the sports. But I wanted to kind of focus on one key element there you mentioned about just the level of strength. Now, obviously, and I had a conversation with someone else on one of our beginning podcasts with Sam Dutney. He's a rowing S&C coach, and I've got it on my Instagram, and he's like strength training isn't a necessity. Being strong is. And how we can get strong, as you've mentioned with the analogy, there are so many ways. And I guess for you, Sam, obviously, if you've got someone kind of within the first, say, 6 months to a year of training, what do you do? Obviously, you've got your baseline testing, you get a kind of profile. Obviously, you mentioned about that. You're one of your clients who's got that wealth of training development. How does that change from someone who's got a higher training age to a lower training age? And do you even use strength training to develop strength? Or get them out moving well?
It's a good question. So I think the underpinning sort of statement that should be agreed upon is that strength is measured in the context of which it's expressed, which I think is what the rowing coach was talking about. That comes from Verkhoshansky.
Could you expand on that?
Yeah, so the simple way to think about it is if you have a powerlifter and a speed climber, for example, they're both equally strong but equally weak at the same time. So if you put a world-class powerlifter in a race with a speed climber, he's going to lose. But if you put a speed climber in a powerlifting competition with an elite powerlifter, he's going to lose. But the way that their performance is determined is very different. But they're both strong. They're both strong. And that's what's really important to understand is that's where the devolution of our profession is happening because of the anchoring to universal metrics. So
on that in particular, when you say they're both strong, are you specifically, obviously you're talking about case specific, but their relative strength, coming back to traditional, their relative strength is they're both relatively strong based on their body weight.
So if we again, like you go into super training and you look at like how they evolved strength deficit, and any student would have known this stuff. You got your absolute max. So if you put them both on an isometric mid-thigh pull, they're both going to read strong. I think if you put them both under a back squat, they may not read strong, to be honest, because I don't know that many speed climbers who back squat frequently. So the So that's where you have kind of like the isolated condition. And so when you start with like a younger athlete, that's where you have such a unique opportunity, because I fast learned when I made it up to was first team and speak to players and stuff. These lads, they'd had 15 conditioners in their career already, and they're all like, right, I need to, because the coach's like, right, I need to establish the data. I need to do this. I need to do that. It's very selfish of the coach, because I need to see these numbers, when actually just ask the player, do you think you're strong? Yeah. Sick. Okay. Well, let's just see. I don't need to, if you think you're strong, I'm happy. Let's look at some of the other metrics that we need, and let's teach you how to do your job. When you start with a 12-year-old, you have a unique opportunity to undo or prevent all of the problems that the next 10 years are going to create. Because when a player joins one club, we do fucking Olympic weightlifting here, so get your broomstick out. We don't do Olympic lifting here. We do the FMS. We don't do, so there's all these biases when actually we miss the point. It goes right back to what we've already talked about, because we're not actually, the idea we're trying to create adaptation of general physical qualities, not transfer of training. So every field sport athlete should do resisted sled walks, resisted sled sprints. That should be the top of the resistance profile of that athlete, of the resistance-based movements. That should be the top. Hill sprints, flies, build-up. That should be it, because they're running-based games. And then you work backwards from that. So when we ran our academies, we would run a really simple protocol where we had an hour, 1 to 2 hours a week, and that first 5 minutes would be some general movement. Okay, some rolls, some stretches, some yoga. Then they'll do jumps. Okay, we'll do about 5 to 10 minutes jumps. Then we'll do some speed literacy work. Then we'll throw some med balls. And then they had 25 minutes of 1x20. And the KPI was to get through 20 exercises in 25 minutes for general capacity, single joint movement. If people just look up the 1x20 program, we ran that for 10 years. We ran that for 10 years, and we had 13-year-olds, 10 meters per second, hitting all the KPIs. We were putting 30 centimeters on counter movement jumps in 12 months in accordance with maturation. Measuring the things that matter. And so what you actually have is the difference between a seasoned athlete and a youth athlete, that's why my speed age principles are really important. They both normalize, because I worked with international rugby players who would start at the same place as a 12-year-old.
Right.
Their physical competency, their previous training would allow them to progress through the stages quicker and the protocols quicker, because when you're young, you're trying to delay specificity for as long as possible. But with advanced athletes, you're trying to increase specificity as fast as possible. So you have these athletes. Even Alex Gray, when I was training him in the NFL, we barely by the third year, we were using speed to load speed. Previously, It was all learning to sprint. And I've said it so many times, he was 6'6", 115 kilos, could run over 23 miles an hour 10 times in under 6 minutes. 6 times in under 10 minutes, sorry. So we did one of our peak workouts was long accelerations up to 40, walk back, set 3 minutes rest, set 3, done. 23 mile an hour. Bing, 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 bing.
What you mentioned there about that velocity, using that as almost a vector of load. That's something that's massively, when I was, this is taking me back now, because I don't know if you know who Gareth Shelbourne is with Move for Sport. Yeah. So I used to work for them, and I interned back in 2019, and they introduced me to this idea of using velocity or using speed as a measure of load, and increasing velocity, increasing complexity as vectors to improve skill specificity. And I think that is something that you don't even touch upon. I know for some of my clients, and this goes back to that kind of strength development, we don't even touch that, because at this point in time, what can move the needle the most? So if we can get some robustness and we get them relatively strong, and then the important stuff matters. But no, I think that's really interesting. One of the big things I'd love to know a little bit more about is if we were to take someone from the Gen Pop scenario, and I think you touched on it a little bit there with getting their almost training age, their specified training age to this modality of training. What are some of the key things that an individual can start developing? I think you touched on hill sprints or weighted sprints. What can they start doing in their training at the minute to help improve whether they're a field-based sport athlete or just recreational athlete in general?
Yeah. Just on what you said there with increasing, like, so you increase load, decrease stability, and add complexity. Inside my book, that's step load and stable to unstable frameworks.
Okay.
That's, if you follow those frameworks, that's how you do it sequentially. And I think that's the nuance, sequential order of things. So, and I'm going to answer your question now with this, is that two people can have the same recipe, follow the same steps, create two different meals. And that's what's incredibly important about understanding training is the finesse of the sequencing, and how you layer things together is what's going to create the true adaptation. And half the time, he talks about that ice hockey guy, I decompressed his system to realize the motor potential that's already in there. Okay, so when we start with a complete novice, we have minimal compression in the system. You think every training session that we do actually forces the body into a sympathetic state, so it can't breathe. You have to come up for air. And that's the analogy of the long-lasting delayed training effect. So which basically means if you create, you need to create enough of a stimulus to create an adaptation, but that doesn't get realized for 14 to 21 days. But most coaches aren't patient enough to understand that. So when we start with a new person, we don't even have to deal with that. So if someone comes to me off the street, walking down Worthing High Street, and goes, "You're that fucking bloke who talks about sprinting on YouTube, on the YouTubes. Help me run. I want to run a 5K. I want to get into track. What should I do?" Perfect. I'm like, money. You're going to start doing yoga. Be in yoga twice a week. 60 minutes, long, deep poses, because you've got to open that body up. You've got to get that body to become more compliant. Then I'm saying, I want you to buy a weighted vest, and I want you to find the biggest set of stairs that you can in the multi-story car park. And I want you to walk up those stairs 2 at a time, 10 times, 1 time a week. Then what I want you to do is go to the track, and I want you to just stride out. 10, 20 times. But if you get tired, make sure you rest completely. That's where I would start. That would be phase 1. We'd do that 3 weeks. And then all of a sudden, he's a runner. We're not going to compromise him by load. We create indirect strength through yoga and weighted vest walks up the stairs, like concentric only. Sweet. And we'll use the strides, the extensive tempo, to build eccentric and elasticity in the body. General prep, 21 days. We'll do 28 days of it if we need to. Then we'd start looking at unlocking the movement potentials. So we'll start using wall drill variations, and wall drills can teach. So learning to sprint is all about teaching people to run fast and move fast. So you use wall drills for acceleration, only categorize and contextualize these up to the first 3 steps. That's where it gets taken out of, that's where people shit on wall drills, because they don't understand specific strength. So anytime I see that, or someone posts something like that, please stop it. Just stop being so facetious, right? You silly sausages. Yeah. And show me your athletes. Yeah, your choppers. So so then we create specific strength capabilities. So we want to put people in the angles that they're going to be in under relative loads, and improve and build capacity on that, because that's going to be motor learning. We're going to get the motor learning. Then once they've learned that, I'm going to start loading that sucker up. I'm going to be like, let's get the biggest and heaviest sled that you can drag. And we'll drag it forwards, we'll drag it sideways, we'll drag it backwards. because we're developing those work capacities. And then on the wall drills, we'll be doing dynamic effort training. Most underrated tool, right, of wall drills is to manipulate them for dynamic strength and dynamic effort. 2012, we were in the CVASP, and Natalia Verkhoshansky was there. It was over in where were we? Virginia. And she talked about shock training. Okay, so not just depth jumping of shock training, but because you've got plyometric and plyometric activity. So plyometric activity is fast eccentric lengthening. Okay, so it's change in length. And so the Latin. So what they were doing is that they were doing a single leg wall drill and resisting that front leg and then creating a shock variation in it to create rapid lengthening of the hip flexors. Simultaneously, you're going to create rapid lengthening of the hip extensors on the contralateral side.
Yeah.
So what that's doing is conditioning the working tissues in a plyometric fashion. So what you're able to do then on top of that is like compound it. Right. So what we do, so someone like this, I would be like maybe a couple phases in, for example. All the time we're going to be monitoring it. I don't care about gym numbers, waste of time. We're going to look at his broad jump. We're going to look at how much weight he can push or how much weight he can pull relative to his body weight. And if he stops cramping, because that's what most, if you've never done like 5 times 30 heavy sled drags, sled pushes, you're going to cramp up to shit.
Yeah.
Because they're so tough. And, you know, again, that's a problem with many coaches. They've never done it. They've never played senior sport and they've never trained for the adaptations they're trying to create. So there's no physical empathy. Definitely. And so with that, what we're able to do is then, so this modality that we would be able to create is to create series sets and series efforts. So for example, this is when we move out of understanding sets of reps and start to introduce something of brackets of work based on neurological fatigue and energy system demand. So you would do, once you're competent, and you'd even start with like heavy banded bilateral wall squats, which is like that front side position, compressing, just that. So working on angular displacement of mass. And I'm doing 6 seconds on, 20 seconds off, 5 times. You show, you see it now, don't you?
Yeah.
And this is where we put out all the work in the in my speed progressions manual, because we've got a continuum of special strength, and when you look at special strength, the determination of it is actually acyclic or cyclic motor abilities that are then measured in sport, right? So we're then able to run through a continuum when we use wall drills or any type of like special strength means. When we did it with the wall drills, we worked through a yielding isometric, an overcoming isometric, a full range of motion, resisted full range of motion, drop, which is shock, so which is the augmented eccentric, and then plyometric variations. Okay.
Yeah.
And this is sick, right? When you get here, if you can get someone to those final stages, you ain't even using a dumbbell. You're not using a barbell. If you go to the gym, it would be tomorrow, which I've kept you up all night when you're thinking about everything I've said. You go in and you do, just try, right? And go and do angular pogos. So in a front side acceleration position on a rack or whatever, and just try and do pogos. Then try and do them on one leg. Then try and do them staggered. Right? Then try to do a pogo into a front, that dynamic strength. And that comes from gymnastics, actually, how you develop the movement.
It's interesting, like, because I'm starting to piece from what you're saying with other individuals chatting, talking about kind of the true development in sport is through play, in terms of you looking at a external agility. So that constant change direction in terms of being able to perform or problem solve, for example. Fundamentally, you're giving the individual all the potential solutions in a physical capacity sense that's actually, to a degree, more truly related in terms of physical capacity, so that then when it requires an external response in terms of that true agility, they can action that and they have the capacity to. And that's really interesting. It's very high level stuff. Hoping people, there'll be some graduates, probably their heads coming off a little bit. But I wanted to touch back on, there was one other element you touched upon in the beginning. I had in my notes, and you talked about yoga. And I'd be intriguing to hear the philosophy behind it, because from what I'm seeing a lot of, there's a lot of neurology elements based back. You talked about sympathetic and obviously parasympathetic. When you talk about someone being relatively untrained and you talk about compression, could you expand on that a little bit in terms of what you mean and what the actual physical effects is?
Yeah. So, I would like to contextualize the last bit that I just said is if I'm actually working on an article on this, that speed is a specialized means of preparation for field sports. That's what it is. So when we change that construct, then hopefully things should start to ripple in place. So when we're thinking about neurology and yoga and how the body works, so every bit of training you do will put an athlete or put you into a sympathetic dominant state. And when we're in sympathetic dominant states, cortisol is increased. We stiffen up, we tighten up. We don't actually perform well. We may express well, which is why the difference between absolute competitive and training maximum is really important, which is why sub-maximal sprinting unlocks more speed for most athletes than maximal sprinting does. Because if you think about this, how much time do you spend at max speed in a max speed sprint?
Depends how long you're running for as well. Yeah,
fuck all. Like if you watch 100 meters when they do the radars,
you're talking about 95% max speed. Yeah,
they hit their peak. They're hardly there. They hit it and then they fall because you can't then find 110.
Yeah,
and anything on a track as well in these events, they're competitive max, not absolute max. So they would have run faster in spells in training. So broadly, so that's why if we understand the fight or flight response, everyone knows fight versus flight. So pre-hardwired in our body, fight comes in when the tiger's going to eat us. Flight comes in after we've had a couple of glasses of wine and a good night with the missus. All right, then you're chilled. Right, so hopefully people can understand the distinction between the two there.
They can,
yeah. So the so as we start to expose new stimulus to an athlete, it will increase the threat response, which is why something called SAID principle exists, which is the specialized adaptations of imposed demands. It's like how you preheat an oven. Or you don't put a steak in a cold pan. People know a lot of these things. We just cloud our mind in training because we want to be perfect, and there's no perfect. So you warm the body up to the stimulus that's about to happen. You do it in a warm up, but you do it through training cycles as well. That's why you have progressions of load. So where yoga sits into this. When you sit, and I encourage any one of your listeners to do this, super simple. Lie down on your back for 5 minutes. Just lie down on your back, your eyes shut for 5 minutes. Put some woosah on or some whale music. I used to do whale music with the guys at Ealing. They loved it in the morning. We just used to meditate.
I can go down well the first time around.
They were like, what? And then I was like, just trust me. And then you had full squad whale music for 20 minutes. People would fall asleep. And then they'd be like, oh, let's go. I'm ready to train, So you're decompressing the system. You lay down for 5 minutes. Then what I want you to do is lean forward and try and touch your toes and hold that for 3 minutes. You start to tell me how you feel after 60 seconds. Because what's actually happening is you're getting the tension. You're putting your hamstring under tension, not just stretching, you're tensioning your whole posterior chain for over 3 minutes at a time. What's that going to teach the body? It's going to teach it length. It's going to teach it to handle tension. It's going to teach it. And then all of a sudden, like PNFs, stretch.
That's where my head went straight away. Yeah.
Compress. You're decreasing threat. That's all you're doing. And then all of a sudden, you're like bloody, I don't know, someone with very stretchy legs.
Okay, the wife out of fan, what was it, Mr. Fantastic?
Yeah. So that's how you're actually increasing performance by neurological gains. And this also happens and if you do that long term, your body then starts to become more compliant because you won't be able to find shapes and positions and limb action at high speed if you can't do it slow.
Yeah.
If your body will cheat. That's what, when we coach athletes, if it looks shit slow, it's going to be shit fast. It's simple. So we just dial it in. Mr. Miyagi. Mr. Miyagi back in the day. Wax on, wax off. And then he goes to punch him and he just goes, whatcha? Access denied, buddy. So and this is how it can pertain to speed, which is why long accelerations work so well. So a long acceleration, for anyone listening, was actually as a loading tool used back in the day for sprinters, where they would gradually accelerate over 120 meters, and they would find speed. And what that allows the athlete to do is just gradually increase their speed at their own rate, which way they're comfortable in. Now we use the word comfortable, not just gun and go. It's get there in your own time, let it build, let it feel. And so for team sport athletes, we can take that up to about 60 meters. Okay, because we're still using supramax distances to create adaptive reserve. All right, so we're building tolerance over 60 meters. And for every step that you're going, your body is starting to actually, your brain is going, okay, I'm safe, I'm safe, I'm safe, I'm safe, I'm safe, I'm safe. And then before you know it, you're 50 meters in and you're striding and you feel amazing. You're not even thinking about running fast because you've released the neural inhibition. So you've decreased the threat response. So which is why anyone listening to this, what I want you to do is go do 3 60-meter build-ups, rest 3 minutes, do another 3. That's it. Go and do that 3 times a week. Your speed PB in 6 to 8 weeks. Lifetime best. You'll run the fastest you've ever ran in your life just because of that. Because what's happening, like how in a like when you do your warm-up sets in a squat, you never count those reps towards anything, but you don't count them because you've got the capacity to handle them. Mm-hmm. And then if you take the other example, you ever done pogos on the spot? The more pogos you do, the higher you can get because you're building that stored and releasing that energy inside the elastic systems in the body. So you take those 2 principles, those 2 examples, and if you start at 0 and go to 60, throughout that whole period of time, you're gradually strength training, your power training and your speed training. Because if you take, and I talked to Ken Clark about this years ago. I had a consult with him and we were discussing maximum velocity, and he was like, how do you do your spacings? I was like, I do them off of maximum stride length at recorded maximum speed. And he was like, oh, I never thought of that. Well, obvious, because you're working off maximum, right? And then you take 10% off the top and you create step load, which goes back to that point. If I can accumulate more steps at 80 to 85, we're counting them, they are going to be the most intense stimulus an athlete can get. That's it.
And then you're building work capacity at that speed as well. Yeah.
Yeah. And guess what? You can get 20 of them done in a workout. And that's the whole context around speed being a specialized means of sport preparation, because that's the thing that we need to understand. If sprinting is the most intense thing we can ever do in existence, then why not work out ways to make that sub-maximal and allow athletes to accumulate it, which is the problem where you listen to a track coach tell you how to train a field sport athlete, because a sprinter has sprinted from when they were 10 or 12 years old.
And if majority in a straight line as well.
Yeah. And if they get to senior, it means they've not broken.
A couple of football academies in the same sort of vein. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So hopefully that illustrates the point of how you'll use the neurological pathways as well. And that's just like a top line principle, because we think we do a lot of work in rehab of actually, if we think neck up for speed training rather than neck down, everything that we do typically is just neck down intervention. And recently I had a client who 2 years, he's got Haglands, but 2 years not able to sprint. Achilles breaking down. We had him doing tempo in 6 weeks. 6 weeks after that, he's sprinting in spikes again. We went neck up rather than neck down. We treated the brain and the threat. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I'm starting to think, like, some of my clients will listen to this, and I'm big on that kind of reciprocal inhibition.
Yes.
If I can get my words out. And for me, I put long.
I feel you, brother. I feel you.
long duration ISO. Honestly, I won't be the only one after this podcast. Long duration ISOs at the beginning of a program, and this not typically in my performance prep. It'll be some type of ISO around the hip complex, because typically they're everyday athletes, they're working at desk bound, and that kind of reciprocal inhibition, as soon as they fire in the glutes, the hip flexors want to relax, the anterior side of the hip relaxes, and they're like, okay, I'm feeling good now. And couple of minutes of those holds after 5 or 6 weeks, because obviously the initial, it's like cramp, I can't do this, this different type of fatigue is settling in. They're like, oh, okay, I get that, and they're moving better. And ever since that practice, that actual application, rather than you hearing it in books and textbooks and theory, you can actually see people move a lot better. So I think you've given me a few ideas in my own personal training to see how this would play out, and I can definitely see the relationship at certain speeds and the capacity that you've mentioned. Awesome stuff.
Where do you just before we wrap, sorry, I've got to go as well, but where do you think long duration isometrics came from? They looked at people who'd done yoga for a long time and they're like, they're really healthy. What do? They sit in long positions. Then, unfortunately, what happens in the modern strength and conditioning space, some fuck creates a course out of it and tells people it's a silver bullet.
I think you're thinking of the same person. Yeah, I was going to say something, but and it gets coined.
Exactly, like it's new. And all it is general training. Masked, because I tell you what else doesn't happen on a fucking football field. Long duration holds, unless someone's pulling shirts in a penalty box.
Honestly, this has been really cool. Definitely opened my eyes on a few key areas in particular. I'm sure for a lot of listeners, depending on where they're coming from, whether it's students, coaches, or even your everyday athletes who are just invested in training, they'll definitely learn a lot. Yeah. Before we go, where can people find you?
Sam Portland everywhere. My email is sam@coachportland.co.uk if you want to reach out. And that's pretty much it. Sam Portland is I made it as simple as that.
Awesome stuff. And before we go, what's on the horizon for you over the next 6 months?
So hopefully releasing the second book in the Sport Speed system. So have been putting together the acceleration manual. So it's kind of like we've created the universe of the Sport Speed system, stolen from Louis Simmons, how he built the West Side stuff. So that should be coming out, and then continuing to try and build and grow the Legacy Mastermind, a safe space for coaches to try and build careers outside professional sport and, maximize their time and get certainty in what they're doing. So that's all it is. And trying to make a comeback to myself on the field. That's one of the big goals. Yeah.
Awesome stuff. I'll put everything in the show notes. Sam, thank you for coming on.
No worries. Appreciate you, mate.
And big thanks to Sam for taking the time out of his day to join us, and thank you for tuning in. Be sure to check out Sam in the show notes below. And if you're looking to improve your physical development and sporting performance, becoming stronger, fitter, leaner and faster, then be sure to reach out and book a training call in with me on my website, that's SamiHusseinSC.com. Or alternatively, you can reach me on Instagram, that's @coach_SamiHusseinSC, and I'll be sure to help out. Until next time, I'll speak to you soon.